Welcome again to Dust Jacket, Memoria College's podcast on books and learning. I'm joined again today by Memoria College professor of philosophy and my colleague Dan Sheffler, and we're going to be talking today about Amor Towles' novel, Gentleman in Moscow. If you've read the book, that's great. I think you'll enjoy the discussion about the deeper elements of this story. If you haven't read it, that's fine too. We hope you'll be convinced that it's very much worth spending some time reading it. I consider it one of the great modern novels. We'll see if Professor Sheffler agrees with me on that. If he doesn't, you may not see him again on the podcast. So Dan, did you like this book as much as I did?
I think I liked this book much better than you did. Well, I adore this book. I think it was a very good read, extremely enjoyable.
Yeah. This is a book by Amor Towles. He's written some other books. He wrote Rules of Civility, which is about New York in the 1930s that just totally takes you there, and The Lincoln Highway as well, which is his last book. Both those books have this really evince this ability that Towles has to bring you into another world. The Rules of Civility, I don't know how he is able, in little things. He knows little things in this book that are all over the place, and you're reading it and you're thinking, how does he know this? How does he know that that's the way it was in 1930s New York? And of course, the reader doesn't know either, but it's so utterly convincing. And every little thing he does, every little thing he says works to the benefit of really the reader, bringing that reader into that world. The Lincoln Highway is about some boys who are on basically a road trip, going the opposite direction in which they intended to go. We'll be talking about that book at some point later on another show, but he does the same thing there. It takes place in 1950s mid-America, Nebraska, and then New York. And again, he does the same thing he always does, which is to bring you into a world. And in Gentleman in Moscow, you got a third, just entirely different world that he can't possibly know too much about because he's living so much later than the events he relates.
At least not directly. I forget where I read this, but somebody was bugging him. Hey, when's your next book going to come out? Mm-hmm. He said, well, it takes me a long time to write these books because I have to do a lot of research.
Yes.
And each of these books, you can tell, is researched, the names and the places and the specifics and just little nuances about the culture and the inflections of the way that people talk to each other and interact. Just masterfully done.
It's very evident. So if we could start then talking about the setting. What is the setting in this book?
Well, okay, so I have to say right at the outset that there's a plot twist at the end, and we don't want to give any spoilers to our listeners that right. we want to talk about this book without ruining the experience for you. So,
well, and let me say, it was a good time to say it, is that we are talking both to people who've read the book and people who have not read the book. And I think that what we will have to say here, we have this very much in mind, we were talking about it before the show, that we want to be able to inspire people to read this book because I do think really it is really one of the modern classics.
Which is what dust jackets are for. They're supposed to get you to go buy the book and go read it.
That's right. Absolutely right. So continue.
Right. So I bring that up because in laying out the very premise of the book, it involves this plot twist. And there's one key piece that right from the very beginning you find out actually is not true. So one of the things that I'm about to say is not true, but you won't know which it is until you read the book. So the story follows Count Rostov, Alexei Rostov, who is part of the Russian aristocracy in the beginning of the 20th century, right when the Bolsheviks come to power in 1917. And he had been sent abroad for a sin of his youth, but he comes back to Russia even knowing that things are falling apart. And it's part of the story unfolding. Why did he do that? Why didn't he just stay abroad? He could have had a nice life in France. But he comes back, and right at the very beginning, the story opens with his trial, where the Soviets say, look, we have been in a habit of executing people of your class with your background. But you wrote a poem long ago when you were young that has inspired many in the revolution and seems to have some kind of love for your country and is worthwhile. And so because of this poem, we'll have mercy on you and simply put you under house arrest.
And the poem apparently had some things in it that were consonant with the revolutionary agenda.
Right, exactly. It had,
which we don't see in
Rostov necessarily. Yeah. So where he's been living is not in his home estate. He had kind of settled that and brought just a few possessions from that estate. And he's been living permanently in this luxury hotel, the Metropole Hotel in downtown Moscow.
Prison. This is his prison.
And because he's placed under house arrest there, this becomes his prison. He's confined to the premises of this hotel, and the story unfolds from there. One of the things that I love about it is that it traces his whole life. So one thing to say right away is that it's not just a story of a single year, but traces his from that beginning point as a young man being put under house arrest in this hotel, follows him all the way.
He's there for decades.
For decades. Yeah. And so you see it's a story about him, but it's also a story about Russia during that time period.
Well, I suppose there are worse things than being confined to a luxury hotel, although that would get tiresome after a while.
Right, we were joking about this earlier that he compares himself to Robinson Crusoe.
Yes.
You know, and there's a humorous irony there that yes, Robinson Crusoe, if he were in a luxury hotel with fine dining and a stash of gold.
Yes. And I thought that comparison was very interesting because I read Robinson Crusoe only recently, really. And what struck me about that book and the character was how what does he do on the island? I mean, he's trapped there. He spends some time taking things off the ship that he can use there by himself, having to survive. What does he do? He tries to recreate his own civilization and maintain maybe his own sort of. He creates a little English outpost. Mm-hmm. He tries to recreate the English life.
Right.
So I think that comparison is very apropos because I'm thinking that that's what you're going to see in this book is that the civilization is very important. There's various ways in which he tries to preserve the civilization of pre-revolutionary Russia, right? So he says at the beginning of the book, says, when the Count's parents succumbed to cholera within hours of each other in 1900, his parents died of cholera. It was the Grand Duke who took the young Count aside and explained that he must be strong for his sister's sake. That adversity presents itself in many forms, and that if a man does not master his circumstances, then he is bound to be mastered by them. And this is repeated several times later. What bearing does that have on the book? What does he do with his circumstances?
Well, so he's put under house arrest, and so his circumstances are pressing him. But he has this way of preserving all the little elements of civility and what it means to be a gentleman. The way he keeps his hair cut, and the way that he keeps enjoying his food, the way that he arranges what little furniture he's able to have up in his his garret loft that they throw him into, the way that he maintains his reading and his way of life, that he takes those circumstances and preserves some bastion of civilization, as you were just describing. I'm reminded of this comment by Roger Scruton, where he says that beautiful things take thousands of years to build, and civilization, culture, is layer upon layer of generation after generation, building these things that make life noble. And yet they can be destroyed in an instant. A single bomb, a single ideological revolution where the Philistines come and sweep away everything with their idiocy, And so what I see him doing is preserving what's worth preserving in the midst of that storm, right, and doing the hard work to keep it alive.
And he's not doing this alone. There are several characters in this book, and two of them in particular, who help him in this effort to preserve civilization in the midst of revolution that's going on outside the hotel. Who are they?
Well, there's a whole cast of characters, the staff of the hotel, that are just delightful. The way that they so you have the staff first. So you've got the concierge who somehow magically knows where everybody is, and you've got the maitre d' at Andre at the restaurant there, and the chef Emile. And the three of them, the Count and Andre and Emile, form what they call the triumvirate. Yeah. That they're the ones that are keeping civilization together, because the manager of the hotel, after a while, actually start this character called the Bishop. Yes. Ironically,
why do they call him the Bishop? He at first. Where does he encounter him first?
Well, in the beginning, that he's a mere waiter who's starting new but doesn't actually know the fine points of being a good waiter. And at the very beginning, he takes offense because the Count corrects one of his wine recommendations.
Yeah. And this is after, we should point out that there's actually two restaurants in his hotel.